Hey everyone, Paulo here. So this one's pretty difficult. Um, I tried something different today, and I tried like highlighting things in this article that would be good to talk about. And so before we get into that, sorry, let's talk about what this is. So this lady is a gender care worker, or she was for a long time. This lady, Jamie Reed. She's 42 years old, St. Louis native. She calls herself a queer woman. She's married to a trans man. But she has two biological kids from a previous marriage. I don't really like that word queer because I don't really know what it means exactly, other than not normal. I guess not in a normal relationship or something. I'm not exactly sure. So I'm not a big fan of that. But this is who she is, and she also describes herself as left of Bernie Sanders, and she's calling this blowing the whistle on trans care. And I wanted to go over a bunch of stuff in this article. Um, she left in November of last year. By the time she departed, she says, "I was certain that the American medical system is treating these patients, and the way it's treating these patients is the opposite of the promise we make: do no harm. Instead, we are permanently harming the vulnerable patients in our care." Which, I mean, if you follow trans issues at all, if you follow this insane nonsense going on right now, this is something that you see over and over again, that in fact trans care and transitioning children is doing them tremendous amounts of harm. But this is a voice, I guess, that you would traditionally expect to advocate for gender transitioning children. Okay, what does she say here? She says, so the problem I had was there's just so many interesting things going on in this article, and I highlighted so much, and we're gonna see this. I mean, it's just like a mess of color, and and that's the problem. But it's interesting to me that prior to this explosion until about 2015, the majority transgender was male. Like, it was a boy feeling uncomfortable in their body, wanting to present as a woman. But now it's teenage girls, and they didn't have any previous history of gender distress. All of a sudden, and we know it's a mind thing. We know it's like TikTok videos are creating crazes where girls think they have Tourette's and stuff, and they actually address some of that stuff down here. Clusters of girls arriving from the same high school. So this is all stuff we've seen before. Anyone raising doubts would be called a transphobe, right? And so this I found interesting. So the girls had lots of comorbidities: depression, ADHD, eating disorders, obesity, and many were diagnosed with autism. And in fact, the British, they say 1/3 of patients referred to are on the autism spectrum. And then there were things where it was just like the whole paragraph, right? Like, so, okay, so this is about like girls who had Tourette syndrome, who self-diagnose, and doctors recognizing these self-diagnoses, and as a social contagion, right? When a cluster does. But when it comes to transitioning, they don't. The doctors don't recognize it and say it's something innate. And this paragraph here really struck me. So to begin transitioning, the girls needed a letter of support from a therapist, usually one we recommended, who they had to see only once or twice for the green light. To make it more efficient for the therapist, we offered them a template for how to write a letter in support of transition. The next stop was a single visit to the endocrinologist for a testosterone prescription. Yikes. That's all it took. So, what are the side effects? Voice drops, beards. So, this is when women take testosterone. Beard sprout, body fat redistributed, sexual interest explodes. That I find interesting. Aggression increases, and mood can be unpredictable. That's very, very much boy things, right? And testosterone driven. It makes sense. Um, But after working at the center, I came to believe that teenagers are simply not capable of fully grasping what it means to make the decision to become infertile while still a minor. And so that's one of the other things, right? So it can create sterility. And so the center's website says, left untreated, gender dysphoria has a number of consequences from self-harm to suicide, right? And that's something we hear all the time. Like, your child might become suicidal. They must be treated or they will become suicidal, right? These are the threats that parents are told, or the things that parents are told. But, also they said that the studies we have show that kids often wind up functioning psychosocially as well or better than their peers. And then this sentence: there's no reliable study showing this. Indeed, the experiences of many of the center's patients prove how false these assertions are. So she's saying the opposite is true, that these people go into this, they transition, and it's a nightmare. And so this is about someone who's taken this thing called bicalutamide, which is a prostate cancer medicine. Men take this, and it has known effect to feminize the body, including the appearance of breasts. A long list of side effects, including liver toxicity. And this kid suffered this, was immediately taken off it, and then the mother, and look at this, afterward his mother sent an electronic message to the transgender center saying that we were lucky her family was not the type to sue, and darn it, they should sue the crap out of them. That mother should, and her family should, sue the crap out of that gender clinic. Okay, so this is pretty brutal. So this girl was bleeding a lot, and like a lot, and she had to go to the emergency room, and they found out later that she had intercourse, and because testosterone thins the vaginal tissues, her vaginal canal had ripped open from the intercourse. So she had to be sedated and given surgery to repair the damage. And she wasn't the only one they heard about, right? So apparently this can cause some very serious problems. And, and this one's interesting too, because it's like the clitoris will enlarge and become what's called a microphallus. And so this lady had recommended these compression undergarments worn by men who want to pass as women. And she thinks to herself, wow, we hurt this kid, right? So this is really interesting. So there are rare conditions in which babies are born with atypical genitalia, cases that call for sophisticated care and compassion, undoubtedly. Because if you have any deformity, right, it's going to require sophisticated care and compassion, because your life is going to be very different than other people's lives. But the clinic, like the one where I worked, are creating a whole cohort of kids with atypical genitals, and most of these teens haven't even had sex yet. Yet all it took for them to permanently transform themselves was 1 or 2 short conversations with the therapist, right? So like I said, I ended up highlighting tons of this article. I apologize for this. This is probably going to be longer than it's already longer than I wanted, but this was so dense and hard to go through that I don't see how I couldn't just point out all these different things. I doubt any parent who's ever consented to give their kid testosterone knows a lifelong treatment, knows that there's possibly signing up for their kids for blood pressure medication, cholesterol, and perhaps even apnea and diabetes. And so this is a letter from a parent. Blank is a shell of his former self, riddled with anxiety. Who knows if it's because of the hormone blockers or other medication? I revoke my consent. I want the hormone blocker removed. And then they get sent these mentally ill children, where, right. So, all right, so this was interesting. For example, one teenager came to us in the summer of 2022 when he was 17 years old and living in a lockdown facility because he had been abusing dogs. He'd had an awful childhood. His mother was a drug addict, his father was in prison, and and he grew up in foster care. Whatever treatment he may be getting, it wasn't working. Now, yada yada, somewhere along the way, he expressed a desire to become female, so he ended up being seen at our center. From there, he went to a psychologist at the hospital who was known to approve virtually everyone seeking transition. Then our doctor recommended feminizing hormones. At the time, I wondered if this was being done as a form of chemical castration. Yikes. And so then they get to this sentence, and I had to look this up. This basically means to assume parentalship, to assume parental responsibility. And so, right. So another disturbing aspect of the center was this lack of regard for the rights of parents and the extent to which doctors saw themselves as more informed decision makers over the fates of these children. And here's somebody going through a divorce where the mother called and who had a tomboy who decided her daughter was a boy. But when I asked if her daughter had adopted a boy's name, she was distressed about her body. If she was saying she felt like a boy, the mother said no. Right? And then a month later, they call back and she has all those things. And the father is saying, no, this was being caused by the mother, which it sounds very likely to be the case. And then the doctor from the facility went and testified on behalf of the mother, and the mother won the court case. So one of the saddest detransitions I witnessed was a teenage girl who, like so many of our patients, came from an unstable family. She was 16. When she was 18, she went in for a double mastectomy. So she was put on hormones when she was 16 and then got top surgery at 18. 3 months later, she called the surgeon's office to say she was going back to her birth name and that her pronouns were she and her. And then she told the nurse that she wants her breasts back. But once they're removed, they're removed, right? There's nothing there. And so then she was basically told this, get on board or get out. And she left the university. Or she didn't leave. She left that job. She got a job elsewhere. But she had to speak out, I guess, when she saw Rachel Levine say this article. The U.S. Assistant Secretary for Health said that the clinics are proceeding carefully and that no American children are receiving drugs or hormones for gender dysphoria who shouldn't. And that was just so crazy wrong that she had to write this article, that she had to speak out. And good for her. I think it's really good to hear people on both sides having this discussion and acknowledging the very serious problems that this gender craze is causing. Anyways, this is going on for quite a bit longer than I had hoped it would, but I just didn't see any way around it with the length of this article. Anyways, please let me know if you like this. Like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you want to see more of. Tell me what I can do better. Anyways, this is Paulo. Have a great day, y'all.